Hi friends, so let's dive a little bit deeper into peaks and valleys, and I wanted to share this fun little fact that I discovered recently. So I wanted to make peaks and valleys. This is the quilt. You can see the little thumbnail here of the quilt. I wanted to do this for a pre-cut challenge that I was presented with. Now, I did not write this for pre-cuts, but I wanted to see if I could make it work. So if I'm looking at the crib quilt size, except for the last fabric, because that includes binding, and fabric number 3, everything else is 3/8 of a yard. So I got to thinking, can I make those cuts work with a fat quarter? Now we know that a fat quarter is roughly 18 inches by 22 inches. So I went online and in Illustrator, I did some figuring, and it turns out that yes, I absolutely could make this work. So I laid out my cuts. I did them in different colors so I could make sure that I had the right counts and I can make it work. Now, if you are thinking, well then Tammy, why didn't you say that this would work for a fat quarter? I didn't design this for pre-cuts, and pre-cuts didn't necessarily work for every single cut. So for consistency's sake, I did selvage to selvage cuts. When you do selvage to selvage cuts, you do have some leftovers, and you may or may not know this, but most pattern designers, when they figure out the yardage, they're going to look at what you need, and then they're going to bump that up. They're going to give you room for truing up your fabric. They're going to give you a little bit of room in case you make a miscut. So those things considered, this is why I did not list this for fat quarters. But I wanted to share this with you because if you are working on a project and you're like, oh, dang it, I have these fat quarters and I'd really love to make this project. Can I make it work? So you could do it online if you are savvy in Illustrator, or I know a lot of folks love to do things in Canva now, and you could certainly do that, and that's an easy peasy way. But let's say that you don't want to do it online. You're more of an analog kind of person. So you could do it on graph paper, and I've already marked out my 18 by 22. This particular graph paper has 32 squares, so it doesn't work great for a 2-to-1 ratio, which would have been lovely because that would have made sense for my 1/2 inches. So depending upon your graph paper, that's going to determine your scale. So for this particular graph paper, 1 square is going to equal 1 inch. So I can do the same thing here on my graph paper. I can do some figuring out with my cuts and see, before I even put rotary cutter to fabric, to do some planning, can I make that work for my fat quarters? Now, if you're wondering, because you're participating in Peaks and Valleys, you're making the quilt, I will tell you that yes, you can make this work for the basic cuts of the quilt. Now, fabric C or fabric 3, you would have to have 2 fat quarters because there's a 1/2 yard, and I cannot make a 1/2 yard of cuts fit into a fat quarter. There's just no way. And for the last fabric, fabric 10 or fabric J, you're going to have something else for your binding, but you can absolutely get your regular cuts in. But this is how I worked it. So I took my largest cut, and I don't remember what it is right now, but let's say that, actually, I think it was 4.5 by 6.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then because this isn't precise, I'm going to go halfway down. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. So there is my first cut. Now I'm going to duplicate that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I already have 5, 6, and I already had that half. And then I'm going to do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. And there I can see I can get my 3 biggest cuts for one of those fabrics. And I'm going to do that same thing all the way across. So for those of you that are more comfortable with pencil and paper, you absolutely could figure out the cuts. If you are digitally inclined, if you have access to Illustrator, that's exactly how I did this. Or, like I said, some folks are doing similar things over on Canva, pulling up a workboard that's the same size as your fat quarter. So am I saying that you have to make Peaks and Valleys the crib size with fat quarters and do all of this extra work? Absolutely not. But if you wanted to, I can tell you that the crib version can be modified to work with fat quarters. So just wanted to share that fun tip with you. Hopefully that helps. Happy stitching.